Hi there, welcome to The Real Agenda with me, Tom Burgess. Now, thanks very much indeed for joining us and hope you're keeping safe and well. Now, today we're going to be talking about something really special that's been missing from politics recently, and that's compassion. And I want to find out how we can bring more compassion back into public life. So who better to ask than Jennifer Nadel, co-founder of the campaigning group Compassion in Politics. Now, if you're a new listener to this show, the focus of the Real Agenda podcast is on fixing the fundamental problems of our time, primarily the extreme economic inequality and the unnecessary financial hardship suffered by millions every day, because that's the Real Agenda. You can find out more at realagenda.org. I had the privilege of working with the inspirational Reverend Paul Nicholson, who founded campaigning group Taxpayers Against Poverty, of which I am now director. Reverend Paul sadly died in March. He described the group as the voice of the compassionate majority and put compassion at the heart of his work. So I'm sure that he would be very pleased that the group that he founded is now partnering with Compassion in Politics. It's the lack of compassionate leadership and not doing the right thing for country over party that got us into this Brexit mess. And for the same reason that the burning injustices have not been addressed. Indeed, as Heidi Allen, former MP for South Cambridgeshire, said, "I can no longer represent a government and a party who can't open its eyes to the suffering endured by the most vulnerable in society, suffering that we have deepened whilst having the power to fix." It's pretty much of an indictment there, isn't it? How can we not pay people enough to live on? Why do we take taxes off those that have no money? How can we have thousands homeless, millions in poverty, and at the same time allow the wealthy to amass even bigger fortunes, when we all help create the wealth from the work we do? We can make change happen, and it all starts with compassion. We have the power to make life better for millions, but we don't do it. Do we not care? Of course we do. Polling shows that after health, economic inequality is the issue voters are most concerned about. And it's also found that 57% believe we need to introduce better economic and social rights and protections. So why aren't we doing it? Let's find out. Jennifer qualified as a barrister before moving into broadcasting with the BBC as a lobby correspondent, and then to Channel 4, and before becoming ITN's Home Affairs editor. Her book on domestic violence was made into a BBC film and a Channel 4 documentary. Her most recent book, which is co-authored with Gillian Anderson, is called We, a manifesto for women everywhere. And she's also stood as a parliamentary candidate twice. So I started by asking Jennifer, what has happened to compassion?
We've just had one little ray of hope, haven't we, from Biden's win in the United States, where he said in one of his pre-election videos, compassion is on the ballot paper. So it feels as if compassion has had some recognition in the United States, but generally what has happened across the globe, and particularly in Britain, is that compassion has been steadily edged out of the political framework. When I think back to the 70s, when I grew up in the UK, and there was a firm social contract in place, we all accepted that we took care of those who'd fallen upon hard times, and that the state was the role that organised that care. And, you know, that social contract, that belief in the welfare state, that it should exist, but for all the basics to be provided to every human in Britain, that consensus was there. And then steadily over the 80s, the 90s and the noughties, compassion has been edged out and replaced by a very individualistic, self-centered approach to living, which is based on infinite growth, on consumption and individual success. Really, it's the success of the neoliberal project, which has promoted individualism over collectivism and over the social contract. So we now have that hanging really by a thread, and all sorts of lies, like the lie that we can't afford our social services, our social contract anymore, that we can't afford our NHS, when in fact it's the most efficient way to provide provision for everyone. So compassion in the UK is edged out. What compassion in politics is trying to do is to get compassion firmly back in the middle of the UK agenda.
So how do you plan to achieve that?
We're working on a number of fronts. We're interested in two main goals. The first is to make the way that we do politics more compassionate, because we think it's very difficult to arrive at compassionate outcomes and compassionate policies if politics is conducted in an environment of hate and division. And our parliamentary system, our really outdated, outmoded parliamentary system, fosters all the adversarial politics that we see replicated throughout our communities. All you have to do is watch Prime Minister's questions, obviously pre-COVID, and you will see the kind of behaviour that would not be tolerated in any other workplace. And so we really want the House of Commons to clean up its act. It's ironic that Westminster, the mother of all parliaments, has given birth to two much more functional children in the Scottish and Welsh parliaments. Their MPs sit in a circle, they don't raise their voice, they don't boo, jeer, heckle, make animal sounds. They wouldn't dream of it. It's a place of incredibly serious work. So we're looking at reforming the environment in which debate is conducted. We're also looking at trying to encourage much more cross-party collaboration. We've set up an all-party parliamentary group for compassionate politics, and the idea there is that we bring people together across all the major parties to focus jointly on issues where compassion is at the heart of it, whether it's our response to the refugee crisis or homelessness or online harm. All of those issues people in every party care about, and what we're hoping to facilitate is a way of doing politics where it's the issue that matters most, and parliamentarians feel supported and enabled to put the issue above their individual party demands. We have this whipping system in Britain, which is effectively a way of blackmailing and bullying MPs to go against their conscience and obey what their party leader is saying. And obviously, some degree of coordination is necessary if you have a programme of legislation you want to get through. But we have a system which militates against parliamentarians doing what they think is best for their nation. So that's the first prong. How we do politics, how we make compassion the way we approach politics. The second is the substance of our policies. What are our laws doing? Point two, the second prong of our approach is the substance of the policies. So it's about what sort of policies we're passing, how compassionate are they? And here we do two things. Firstly, we are promoting what we call a Compassion Act, which would be a legislative mechanism to ensure that before you passed a law, you had to have done an assessment to see how it would impact those in the most vulnerable circumstances. Because over the last 10 years, we have all seen governments introduce policies which are enormously cruel and impact so horribly on those who have least. So as a very basic start, we would say that compassion requires that you don't legislate in ways that harm those who are already struggling to keep a foothold in their lives, in their housing, in their ability to feed their children, in their working. That's number one. And number two is looking at other policies where compassion is really, really essential, and yet it hasn't been put at the heart of it. So whether it's a budget, whether it's homelessness legislation, whatever it is, compassion is a huge feature that is often missing from these provisions. So we campaign on individual pieces of legislation or policy changes that are lacking compassion and where compassion should be. I'm very guided in all that I do in this respect by the founder of Taxpayers Against Poverty, the Reverend Paul Nicholson, who became a good friend over a relatively short period of time. And he was this tireless campaigner for the poorest of the poor. You know, he was a priest who worked on the ground in Tottenham with those who faced eviction or families who were forced to live in one-room temporary accommodation for years and years with their children. And the Reverend Paul really had two goals. One was to end homelessness. There's no reason why we should have any homeless, and certainly we shouldn't have homeless children and homeless families. And the second thing that he was so passionate about, which we completely support in Compassion in Politics, is his belief that we needed to have a minimum income standard. Because if benefits aren't at a reasonable enough level to enable you to live, they're pointless. And similarly, if the minimum wage isn't at a level that enables you to live without resorting to food banks, we have got something badly wrong. And if we look at food banks, that's a prime example of the extraordinary way in which this country has plunged, that we now take it as normal that we have food banks and that people are hungry, that people cannot afford to feed themselves. This was unthinkable 2 decades ago, and yet it's now a feature of everyday life. And much of that has to do with the fact that we are not providing, you know, whether it's in employment or whether it's in benefits, people with enough income so that they can meet their basic needs. So those issues are very dear to our heart at Compassion in Politics, just as they were to the late Reverend Paul and his organisation Taxpayers Against Poverty, with whom we work very closely.
Why have these problems not been fixed? Basic needs of people, whether it's an affordable home, adequate food on the table. It would seem that these are basic needs, and yet our governments fail to resolve it or to even seem to make any progress. Why is this?
Well, it's all about political choices. It really is. And the damaging narrative that has arisen since Thatcher's election here and Reagan's election in the States is that if we support people, we're in some way enabling them to stay poor or to become dependent. And that's just ludicrous thinking. If someone is hungry, how on earth are they going to be able to improve their situation? If someone doesn't have the security of secure and proper housing, how are they meant to improve their situation? So this is all about political will, and it's also about what politicians think voters really care about. And you know, we've gone from those days when we all believed in the social contract to a situation now where people on benefits are often dismissed as scroungers or cheats and are not treated with dignity. And that creates a culture of victim blaming, where instead of helping those who've fallen upon hard times, we blame them in some way. And there are all sorts of psychological reasons why that happens. We're frightened of our own vulnerability. We're frightened of being in the position we see others in. So if we can blame them for being in that position, we have a reason that they're there, and it can't just be that they got unlucky, because if they got unlucky, we could be unlucky and we could be them. So psychologically, we try to create difference and we other those who have least. And that makes the job of those politicians who don't really want to tackle those problems so much easier, because they don't have the public demand for it. But one of the things that has become clear during lockdown, once again, is just how compassionate we are as a nation. You know, the support for our key workers and our frontline workers, the incredible way that communities pulled together and fed their neighbours and fed the homeless and walked dogs and created the most extraordinary uprising or rebellion, almost compassionate rebellion, that this is actually what our nature is and the nature of our country. But somehow politicians have lost track of that and have deliberately tried to tear us away from that fundamental heart in favour of a more individualistic approach. But actually, we're all decent at our core.
Isn't the fact that actually, you know, it is what people want? I think you did some polling, didn't you, that showed that after health, economic inequality was the key issue.
Yes, we did. And you're absolutely right. We found that a majority of voters do want those basics to be met. So the government is out of step with its voters. It thinks it's doing what the public want, but it isn't. The public clearly do want everyone to have their basic needs met and see it as the role of the state. Similarly, the public in poll after poll that we conduct clearly clearly say that they want more compassion in politics and they would support more compassionate leaders. Now, of course, there is a gulf between what people say they want and who they actually vote for. But we really think that if, as in the States, compassion was put on the ballot paper, that people would vote for it, and that whatever party you're in, you can start putting it on your individual manifesto straight away.
You've got quite a few specific initiatives underway. Are you saying that it's a mindset of people in politics? And yet you've had a lot of support amongst MPs, haven't you? I think you've got quite a number signed up to your compassionate pledge, and yet the full body of them are not acting on this.
Politicians, as I said previously, are pulled between party loyalty and party ideology and the decency which drives most of them to go into politics. So there are multiple reasons, but we think something that we can really make a difference with is supporting and amplifying the work of those politicians who do make a stand for compassion. And we've recently established an all-party parliamentary group for compassionate politics. And one of the things that does is bring together MPs who do want a different way of working, irrespective of what their party leaders want. And that is then in turn spearheading a number of initiatives, which we're very proud of. Just later this week, we're bringing psychologists into Parliament to look at the missing piece of the jigsaw, the elephant in the room, if you like, which is why do politicians become so distanced from those goals they originally had of making the world a better place? Is it to do with individual aspirations and careerism? Is it to do with something that happens when you're in a position of responsibility and have to make difficult decisions? Psychologists have a lot to say about this, so we're bringing expert psychologists in. We're also bringing experts in workplace safety. We're also getting cross-party support for some other compassionate measures like Section 1 of the Equality Act 2010. Section 1 of the Equality Act 2010 would give socio-economic rights to people, and it was not enacted. The rest of the Act was enacted, which obviously, as we know, provides for gender equality and various other provisions. But it could also provide for economic equality. And in one fell swoop, this levelling up that the Conservative Party has promised could happen if they were to enact it. And we just last week had our first Conservative MP write openly in the Times newspaper calling for that clause to be enacted. And that's something that Labour has long wanted and the Lib Dems also support. So sometimes, the solutions are there, but because of this divisive way we do politics, a consensus hasn't been built around them. So,
isn't one of the issues that rarely we're measuring sort of performance, if you like, of both society and the economy by the wrong measures? So GDP is out of date, but how do we measure the well-being and the improvement in incomes and so on? Are we measuring the wrong things?
Absolutely right. And yes, we are definitely measuring the wrong things. We measure the success of our economy and our country in terms of its GDP, and we are fully in support of the campaign to have a well-being index in addition to or instead of GDP, so that we really measure the things that make people's lives worthwhile. Been sold a pup that somehow having will make us feel better. But we all know the things that really matter, and COVID has reminded us. It's about the quality of our relationships. It's about what brings us meaning. It's about nature. It's about feeling like we're happy with the way that we're living. It's about not working crazy hours. It's about not being able to not work at all. It's about, really fostering a society in which the resources we have are so much better shared out. Measuring GDP is antithetical to that goal. So yes, we very much think that it's an outmoded way of assessing the success of our economy and our country.
The fundamental issue, or the fundamental guide to live in, is about compassion, isn't it? I mean, most faiths talk about it, love thy neighbour, or they all talk about it. Actually, that's the main thing, or love one another.
So you're right. The golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated yourself, is found in every single major faith group and every single religion. And of course, what in this country has gone hand in hand with the rise of consumerism is the falling away of organized religion. And I'm not advertising religion. The religion plenty has done, terrible harms. But what I am saying is that it gave a moral code, that kind of an understanding, a common shared value system that joined us all together. And that value system has been edged out and replaced and usurped by one that prioritizes the individual rather than the community. And so, yes, we need to get back to those fundamentals that most of us live by in our own houses. Are just not reflected in our workplaces and in our government.
So what specifically, so anybody listening to this, think, well, this is really important. This is the key point. And certainly that's what I see. This is the key point from which all other political policies will come off. Is it compassionate? Does it help people? And so on. So what can we the people do to bring more compassion into politics and indeed into public life?
Well, obviously we'd like any listener who feels sympathetic or is drawn to what we're doing at Compassion in Politics to go online and sign up as a supporter. It doesn't cost anything, but the more people we have signed up, the greater the muscle power we have. And if you do sign up, we will keep you informed of all the different campaigns and the conversations we're having. We organise a lot of events with leading thinkers and scientists and politicians where we discuss these ideas and the various initiatives that we're working on. And in addition, it's letting your parliamentarians know and your local councils know, because we also work a lot with local councils, that you want compassion. You want compassionate behaviour and compassionate policies. And trying to get your MP, if they haven't already signed up, we've had active engagement with over 100 MPs, but we welcome anyone writing to their MP and asking them whether they support compassion, and if they do, why they haven't yet signed up to support Compassion in Politics or joined its all-party parliamentary group. So those are some immediate actions.
In order to make things happen, money is usually required. So how are you getting on with that?
Well, you have touched on our major problem, Tom. Thank you for cutting straight to the chase. We've done an incredible amount in the 2 years since we were founded, but we are still run by volunteers, and we could do so much more if we had some proper funding. And we've got a crowdfunder online, so please do check it out. If you go to compassioninpolitics.com, you'll see it. We've got a really wonderful film that was made pro bono by a leading advertising agency, and kindly Jason Isaacs, the actor, is well known for many films like The Patriot, but also for his role in Harry Potter. He was Lucius Malfoy in Harry Potter. So he has kindly provided his voice for it. And it really sums up the moment that we're at, which is that we have a pause. Coronavirus has given us a moment to pause and to think about what we want to be as a society going forwards. And, our hope at Compassion in Politics is that we will make kinder choices. And so please do go online, support our fundraising campaign if you can. If you can't support it, share our film, tell other people about it, and sign up as a supporter, because together we know that the solutions exist, and we know that most people want them, and we just have to make it happen. And with everyone's help and support, we can. And
it's not just in the UK, isn't it? You've had some useful contact internationally. Part of a sort of global movement seems to be moving forward on this. Is that right?
It is, yes. We're very grateful. We've had people get in touch with us spontaneously in other countries. So we have a Compassionate Politics in Spain. We have one in Argentina. We have one in Australia. We have people who are keen to set one up in the States, although that hasn't yet happened. So get in touch if you would like to help us with that. And every country has got the same struggle going on between the forces of, libertarian, rugged individualism and those which point to a kinder, more caring way. The more countries start promoting these compassionate policies, the easier it will be for all of those politicians to enact the policies we want them to enact and to feel supported as part of a global movement.
Indeed we do, and it's obviously a very, very important issue here, and as we've said, it's the base of all politics. We have to have compassion.
I think we forget what the point of politics is. The point of politics is to make the world a better place and to alleviate avoidable suffering. And we forget, we think it's about winning it. We think it's about our tribe, our party being first past that finishing line. And we think it's about our ideology. But that's not what politics is about. And we forget, we get lost in the detail. We get lost in solutions. If you look at Brexit, that was about attachments to either staying into the EU or leaving the EU, but it didn't actually attempt to answer the questions which were driving those policies, which was why are so many people not feeling heard and seen and recognised? Why are so many people fearful? Why do so many people feel they've lost their identity and their sense of belonging? You know, if we had addressed those questions and had that conversation, then hopefully, you know, the referendum and the enormous economic harm that will result to so many in our society as a result of Brexit wouldn't be happening.
Isn't there a role for the media to play here? Because they seem very keen on reporting on conflict and rather than compassion, and the way that media describe events that take place.
Well, I have to confess here that I'm a bit of a gamekeeper turned poacher, because I was a journalist for many years, a television journalist, and so I know the pressure that journalists are under. You know, what the media defines as a story is someone winning a battle or being humiliated. You know, you cannot change your mind safely in politics. If you change your mind, you're making a U-turn, or you're being indecisive, or you're not being an effective leader. And that is just such nonsense. You know, common sense would dictate if you try something and it's not working, you need to modify it or you need to change it. And yet you're absolutely right. The way the media covers stories, it doesn't leave any room for you know, sensible, thoughtful policy making and revisions of policy. And similarly, it fosters division, it fosters the fighting. It's all about the conflict. The people who are invited onto our channels are the people who will disagree, and the story is always in the fight or the humiliation. And the story isn't people reaching consensus or people coming up with a positive way forward. That's not a news story. For it to be a news story, it has to be conflict based, and so our politics and our media are intimately involved in this dance where both feeds the other, and that dynamic sadly persists. And yes, the way we do journalism could really do with reforming as well, and with far more compassion at its heart.
Well, we've certainly got a lot of work ahead here then. How many MPs is it have signed up to the pledge now?
Well, we've got over 100 MPs who signed up to our pledge, which was to conduct themselves politically in a more compassionate way. And we're now working with ACAS and with professional bodies to try and really get that code improved, fine-tuned and embedded in political practice.
Good. Well, I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? If we can really work on those MPs, if they actually signed up to it, it mustn't just be, I've signed up to it, it must be actions. Hopefully we'll see that, and you can get some more MPs signed up so that we've got a majority that have done, and then maybe we'll get some action.
Absolutely, and we believe there is that majority there, but we just have to encourage them through carrot and stick.
Thanks very much, Jennifer, for explaining it all to us, and you know, we'll be watching developments with interest, and I hope people listening to this will want to take some action and get involved. So I wish you the best with the campaign.
Thanks, Tom. It's always so good to speak to you, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Jennifer. All the best. Speak to you again soon. I hope that's given you some more insight into this fundamental issue in British and indeed world politics at this time, and how by working together we can bring more compassion into our politics and make change happen. So what can you do? Here's 3 actions. First, sign up to Compassion in Politics, get their updates. You can go to their website, www.compassioninpolitics.com. Talk to your family and friends, and be sure to bring more compassion into your own life and lead by example. And 3, ask your Member of Parliament to sign the Compassionate Pledge. Now, there's more details about that on the Compassion in Politics website. So what's up next? Coming soon on The Real Agenda, we talk about rebellion, money rebellion, and how we can draw attention to the gross injustices in our economic system. We'll be talking tactics with Dr. Gail Bradbrook, co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, and how history shows us that civil disobedience brings results. Plus, former BBC Newsnight and Chief North American correspondent Gavin Esler gives us his take on the never-ending American elections in the second of our series of The State We Are In. That's all exclusive on the Real Agenda network of podcasts for political change. So what do you think? Contact us on info@realagendaradio.org or via our website, realagenda.org. We'd love to hear your views. You can sign up for our updates, and we hope that we've helped inform, involve and inspire you into action. Now, one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. That's The Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.